Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special event on Ashura at Harvard. My name is Payam Mohseni, and I'm the director of the project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs at Harvard University's Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. I wish those in attendance today, celebrating the eve of the 15th of Shaban tonight, the birth anniversary of the Savior, the Mahdi, according to many 12er Shias, a very happy Eid. A holiday that is celebrated by millions of Muslims across the world, and a night commemorated to be sacred by many more, and also wishing a happy Nowruz to the start of spring, which is a very important symbolic Persian holiday that has a special position across the Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia in particular, but especially for Shia communities. So wishing everyone a pleasant start to the spring as a sign of rebirth and renewal, hope and light after a period of darkness, may be a source of joy and warmth to all of you, and herald better times ahead, hopefully not too far in the distant future. Today, we are very excited to announce and mark the launch of our new research and scholarly engagement on Ashura at Harvard and the life of Imam Husayn. The project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs plans to undertake research and produce high-quality scholarly output on the historic event of Ashura and the culturally diverse manifestations of mourning for Imam Husayn in the West, as well as in traditionally underappreciated areas of the Muslim world. We envision this initiative to be a multi-year project where we expand scholarly focus and output on Ashura and the life of Imam Husayn within US academia at an institution such as Harvard University to advance scholarly knowledge on the subject, pursue widespread public education on the topic, and hopefully foster a greater common understanding between religions and communities in the plural society within which we live today. We're excited and very appreciative to be sponsored by the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York to launch this comprehensive research track on the various dimensions of Ashura in the study of Shi'ism and the Shia world in the memory of the late Mustafa Jaffer. And we very much look forward through the Jaffer Family's foundations, continued support over the future years in order to both sustain and expand our research efforts on Ashura at Harvard, and support the work of students and scholars and academics alike interested in pursuing the study, the academic study of the subject in a rigorous manner, and for holding workshops and events accessible to public audiences more broadly as well. It stresses very much the importance of community and community support to help advance the field of Shia studies at American universities and higher education, a very significant endeavor given the dearth of focus on Shi'ism and the marginalization of Shia studies within the academy more broadly. This is particularly salient given the general misunderstandings and broader negative portrayals of Shi'ism that can be commonly seen around us, and also the promise of helping correct this narrative in university spaces and American academia, which plays an important role in impacting narratives and general understanding, not only in the United States, but also internationally. The purpose of our event today is to announce the launch of our research track and to speak more broadly about the work we're doing at Harvard as part of the project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs, as well as discuss the importance of higher education and the role of education and academia in the subject of Ashura and the study of the life of Imam Husayn. I will begin by speaking to you a bit about our work and the new initiative, and then we'll be fortunate to hear from other scholars and community leaders as well, including Nicholas Boylston, Hasnain Walji, and Mohammad Sagha, each of whom I will introduce separately. And I would also like to invite two of the board members of the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York to speak a few words for us as well later as part of this event. So the project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs was established in 2019 with the goal of advancing and promoting the academic study of Shi'ism in a comprehensive, holistic, and multidisciplinary perspective. The project encompasses an interdisciplinary approach with a focus on the history, sociology, theology, and politics of the diverse Shia communities and nations across the globe, who number over 220 million individuals, mainly spread across the Middle East, Central and South Asia, Africa, and the West. From the flourishing of global Shia diaspora communities in the West to the growth of highly interconnected state and non-state actors in the Middle East, to pressing intellectual debates in the Islamic world, the study of Shi'ism is of growing importance in world affairs. Indeed, the rise of modern Shi'ism has been one of the most eventful developments shaping the cultural and socio-political landscape of the Islamic world. To pursue in-depth scholarship on such a rich and expansive field, our work is organized according to 4 primary domains of research and study. 1, Shia history and identity. 2, Shi'ism and geopolitics. 3, ethnic and religious sectarianism and sectarian de-escalation. And 4, the global Shia diaspora and Shi'ism across the world. Shi'ism in general is very understudied in academia, especially in the modern period, and in subject areas such as Shi'ism outside of the Middle East. We're very much interested in promoting research and establishing new research tracks on Shi'ism in the subcontinent, looking at India and Pakistan, for example, as well as Shi'ism in Africa and Latin America, Southeast Asia, and in the Western diaspora, of course, and looking at various diaspora communities more broadly, such as Shia communities in the Caribbean, or the Khoja communities that have established significant and successful communities across multiple continents, notably in Africa and North America, that most people are unfortunately quite unfamiliar with. Support for these research endeavors is significant to allow for greater documentation, understanding, and overall development and research on Shia history, sociology, and culture, and the strengthening of intellectual foundations of the study of Shi'ism. We're looking for student, scholarly, and community engagement to allow us to further develop and advance these fields. The rise of Shia consciousness and identities is arguably one of the biggest stories in world history over the past two centuries that has largely been overlooked in analyses. By World War I, for various reasons and factors that time unfortunately won't allow us to delve into, most people would never have expected Shia Islam to be important in our world today or to experience any sort of revival or progress that we've seen recently. The Shia had been marginalized under the Ottomans, Iran had been in a state of decay with Western colonialism, Shia dynasties were dismantled or collapsing in South Asia, and up until recent times, the current century, the Shi'ism could not really be openly practiced in Iraq, an important heartland of Shi'ism in the modern period of the country. Fast forward to today, and we see Ashura and the Arba'in pilgrimage as the largest pilgrimage in the entire world, witnessing tens of millions of pilgrims from across the world commemorating the sacrifice of Husayn. Shia seminaries are increasingly significant in areas of education and life for societies across the Asian continent and beyond. A growing amount of researchers are pursuing the study of Shi'ism, which is also increasingly capturing world attention through events such as the Arba'in pilgrimage, while Shia communities and professionals have been highly successful abroad in the diaspora community. The Harvard Weatherhead Center's project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs is the only center at a US university that has a comprehensive focus on Shia studies in the country, looking both at the contemporary period and at history, bridging disciplines and subject areas in a larger context where Islamic studies or Middle East studies has largely been pursued through a dominant Orthodox Sunni focus and narrative. It is in this light that a focus on Ashura and the life of Imam Husayn is important and significant as part of our work, given the critical role Ashura plays in Shia thought and identity, as well as in Shia societies and the sociological and cultural phenomena of Ashura. So both a subject of history and of a contemporary period, a source for ritual practice, as well as for spiritual and moral values and philosophical frameworks and worldviews. A topic that can also allow for greater understanding, interfaith work, and peace building as well for interfaith dialogue within Shi'ism. We greatly hope that our new initiative on Ashura at Harvard can help advance and expand our understanding of the broad and multifaceted dimensions that produce the sociological and spiritual phenomenon of Ashura as a gateway for understanding Shia thought and Shia societies. Once again, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to the Jafar Family Foundation of New York for helping make this important research track on Imam Husayn a reality. And I hope this discussion serves as an opportunity to connect with community and civil society leaders in a constructive conversation on research on Shia Islam at Harvard universities. I would like to end by thanking Harvard Weatherhead Center for International Affairs for being such a wonderful home for the project and a rich scholarly and intellectual environment for pursuing advanced scholarly research on pressing areas of global affairs. I would also like to thank our faculty co-chairs for the project, Professors Ali Hassani and Melanie Kamet, for their support and advice throughout this endeavor. I would also like to thank Professor Hassan Abbas for all of his advice and care for the growth and success of the project since our inception, without whose support our work would not have been so impactful. I'd also like to thank Dr. Walji for his endeavors and commitments to further this important research track and his contributions to the study of Shia Islam. And finally, I would also like to thank Haider Kazemi, community member and supporter of the development of Shia studies in American academia and the American University, and particular at our project at Harvard, for his kind and generous support and advice throughout the year. Thank you to all of you. I'd like to now introduce our first speaker, Professor Nicholas Boylston, who will speak for us on the academic importance of studying and researching Ashura. Dr. Boylston is a lecturer in the study of religion at Harvard University. He studies Islamic intellectual history, Shia Islam, Quranic tafsir, and Persian literature through the lenses of religious intellectual and literary pluralism. He holds a PhD in Islam and religious pluralism from Georgetown University, an MA in Islamic philosophy from the University of Tehran, and a BA from Harvard University. And he's currently working on the Quranic commentary of the 14th century Shi'i Sufi Sayyid Haydar Amoli. With that, thank you so much, Dr. Boylston, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments on this important subject.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohseni, for that kind introduction. And I'd also like to thank the Jafar Family Foundation for supporting this project. I have to say, I was really delighted and impressed to hear that the theme of this research track would be Ashura, which I think is deeply important. And I think that's something I'll be speaking about today. So I'll start with an anecdote. I was an undergraduate at Harvard in the early 2000s, studying Islamic studies, and I became interested in Shi'ism and started doing research on it. I read the available books I could get my hands on. And then at the end of that project, I went to Iran and studied there for 3.5 years. Now, when I got to Iran, I realized after that book learning, my understanding of Shi'ism was completely wrong. Something I encountered in Iran about Shi'ism was completely different from what I'd seen in the books. There's something about Shi'ism that was not able to be reduced to simply the history that I'd read and that was available to me at the time. And this is incredibly important, and a massive part of this is the events of Ashura. There's so many dimensions of the teachings and the spirit of Shi'i Islam that are present in Ashura that are not simply accessible if we take a simply historical approach to Islam. So I think this is a real opportunity to open doors to students like my former self to really understand Shi'ism in a new light through the kind of work that this research track is going to do. And it's very important that there's a real lacuna here. Things haven't really changed since I was an undergraduate. There's a few more works that have been published, but there's so much more that needs to be done to make the tradition and the meaning of Ashura accessible to students and to a broader audience. Now I'm going to speak about the significance of the study of Ashura in the academy in 4 dimensions. But I have to say this is a topic that's inexhaustible. That's again why this is such an excellent choice for research track, because meaning and significance of Ashura really is an inexhaustible topic. So the first dimension of this I want to mention is history. And it's important to remember that the event of Ashura is deeply, deeply significant for Islamic history. I would hazard to say, people might disagree with me, but I'd hazard to say that it's perhaps the most important event in Islamic history after the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, it's deeply important not only because it's with Ashura that the nascent Shia community actually coalesces and starts forming into a more specific identity. The events of Ashura and the meaning of that had a deep impact on the progression that would lead to the eventual development of the different schools of Shi'ism. But the importance of Ashura is not limited to the Shia tradition alone. In fact, the event of Ashura, in fact, led to a real awakening of the consciousness of Muslims. And as Marshall Hodgson points out, it led to the development of what was called the pious opposition to the Umayyads, which eventually actually led to the development of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, to the development of what would become Sunni Islam. So the event of Ashura really impacted the entire Islamic world and the consciousness of Muslims of the time and shaped the tradition indelibly. The next point I want to mention is something Dr. Mohseni has already pointed out, and that's the importance of Ashura for understanding cultural diversity. Now, within the last couple of decades of Islamic studies, this has been a real point of focus. Scholars have wanted to move away from this idea that Islam is a simply monolithic tradition. There were a lot of people in the mid-20th century, scholars in the West, who presented Islam as simply being Sunni Islam, that presented Sunni Islam as being monolithic, and also had an implicit Arab-centered bias to that. Now, there's a lot of good work that's been done in the last few decades showing that that's not at all the case, that of course, most Muslims live outside of the Arab world, that there's a great diversity within Islam, and Shi'ism has a massive role to play in that. So by focusing on Ashura, we actually bring to light this cultural diversity, the cultural diversity of the celebration of Ashura, the commemoration of Ashura being more central, and also the meaning of Ashura in wider discourses. So it gives us a way of focusing on the cultural differences between, let's say, the Iranian region, South Asia, West Africa and East Africa separately, and as Dr. Mohseni said, diasporic regions as well as the Arab world. But crucially, it's by studying that diversity that we can then think again about unity. So studying the cultural diversity of Ashura not only shows us the many interpretations of the Islamic tradition and the many interpretations of the Shia tradition, it also then, once we've completed that study or progressed in that study, it allows us to see the deeper resonances. It allows us to see what connects Shia communities across these regions. And that unitive move that comes about through studying diversity is extremely important. The next feature I want to mention, which is particularly important for me, is the spiritual and ethical significance of Ashura. Now, for me, something very interesting that's happening in the academy right now is that there are movements, usually under the title of decolonization or post-colonial studies, which want to counteract Eurocentric narratives about what it means to be human. What that means is there's a possibility in the academy now to present non-Eurocentric views of what human life means, of the significance of being human, and bring to the table voices from traditions across the globe that help us understand what we are, help us understand who we really are. And the more voices we bring to the table for that discussion, the richer that discussion becomes, the greater we understand about the human state, and the greater we're able to interact with each other. Now, what's crucially important here is the Shia traditions have a massive role to play here that has not been tapped. The Shia perspectives on questions such as justice, questions such as ethics, questions such as spiritual cultivation are deeply impactful and potentially of great significance for people simply interested in the humanities writ large. The humanities now is becoming more and more global, and through projects such as this, there's a great potential for Shia voices to come to the table and present Shia narratives about what it means to be human. Now, more specifically, why is Ashura important for this? First of all, Ashura really presents us with perhaps the clearest and most tangible message of the Ahlul Bayt, what the Ahlul Bayt stand for. The standing of Imam Husayn for justice against injustice, the willingness of Imam Husayn to sacrifice, the message of his companions, family members, the sermons of Zainab during Ashura actually, and then after Ashura, really present a core narrative of what the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt actually are. Ashura is also deeply important for understanding the concept of walaya, which arguably is at the heart of Shi'ism. Now, walaya is a complex concept meaning both spiritual authority and temporal authority, and also love and proximity, which is the root of the Arabic term. Now, walaya is seen by many Shia traditions to be the core of the message of the Imams, and it's what brings the followers of the Imam back to God. It's what allows the followers of the Imam to practice their religion authentically, but also to undergo spiritual transformation. Now, the core aspect of walaya is it's not possessed by the Imam alone, but it's also possessed by the community. The community participates in that reality. And we see that first and foremost in the beautiful stories in the narrations about Ashura, the Maqtal literature, where the companions, for example, of Imam Husayn the night before Ashura say, would that we could be burned 100 times, but that you survived this. So there's a real important teaching within Ashura of this teaching of walaya, of what it means to have, for a Shi'i devotee to have that love for the Imam and to enact that within their lives. And finally, I would say there's an ethical and a spiritual teaching within Ashura in that the specificity of Shi'i ethics is really seen in Imam Husayn, and the desire of Imam Husayn to fulfill his destiny, to fulfill what, according to some theologians, was his destiny to revive the tradition writ large. And there's a spiritual opening here too, when you have mystical understandings of the events of Ashura and the meanings of martyrdom, the meaning of what it means to sacrifice one's life for a higher cause. So there's an important, really rich range of discourses here and teachings here that really contribute, actually, I would say, not only to the understanding of Shi'ism, but to general understanding of what it means to be human. There's a message of Ashura which has a universality to it. And that brings me to my last point, that Ashura is also deeply significant for understanding Islamic unity. It's really important that the Shi'i communities aren't the only ones who've commemorated Ashura, but it's been commemorated across the Sunni world. From Morocco, I've seen commemorations in Turkey, in India, and beyond that even to the Caribbean. And there are participants in Ashura, Shi'is, of course, Sunnis, certainly, but even beyond to Armenian Christians, Husseini Brahmins who are Hindus but commemorate Ashura. So it has a really powerful impact of bringing people together, which is, I'm sure, something that people in this research track will study. Now that brings me to a larger question here, in that given the importance of studying Ashura in all of these different dimensions and many more, which I'm sure further scholars and students will bring to the table, we should note that this project is deeply important for the academy writ large. As Dr. Mohseni has said, there's a real dearth of study of Shi'ism in the academy, and this is a real lack. Right now, if a student asks me, where should I go to study Shi'ism? There are very few places that I can send them. There's you can count the number of scholars of Shi'ism at major universities on 2 or 3 fingers. Most of the major universities in the United States do not have scholars who can talk about Shi'ism. And this is extremely detrimental. So we have to ask ourselves, if there are not scholars of Shi'ism in these universities, who is setting the narrative about Shi'ism? Who is counteracting the prevalent misconceptions about Shi'ism that exist both within the Islamic world, but also within the United States and the West? Where are the scholars who are going to reset the narrative and present a more accurate assessment of the Shia tradition? And right now, it's not only that we don't have scholars, we don't even have many places for scholars to be trained. So it's crucially important for institutions like Harvard, through projects like this, and hopefully this is the beginning of many things to come, to create spaces for the training of scholars who will then teach at the many other universities around the United States that are training people who will have great influence in the future in US society and around the world. And finally, it's worth noting that there's a massive interest in Shi'i studies, and it's really the students at the moment who are pushing for this. So right now at Harvard, we have Professor Ahsani who teaches on Ismailism. On the Twelver tradition, it's Dr. Mohseni and I, and that's it. And I'm leaving at the end of this year to take up a tenure track position in Seattle. So there's a gap here that's deeply missing, but the student desire is there, both from the community of the students, but also the scholarly interest. I've counted between around 12 or 14 graduate students who are interested in studying some aspect of Shi'ism, and unless they're studying Ismailism, they have no faculty support. There's no faculty support at Harvard for a graduate student who wants to study Shi'ism and be trained in Shi'ism. So this is, again, it's a wonderful occurrence that the Jaffer Family Foundation has sponsored this project, and it's a wonderful occurrence that we're going to have this opportunity for the Ashura track, and I'm deeply grateful for that and really excited about it, and hopefully this will be the start of many great things.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boylston, for your very kind comments and very engaging and insightful remarks and analysis on the importance of Ashura for both the contemporary world, the Islamic world, and for understanding Islamic history writ large as well. And very much look forward to having you with us in this project, and looking forward to join endeavors in this field.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Walji, who has been, a very dear friend and who supported and advised us throughout this project. And he'll be speaking for us today on the history of the academic study, basically, of Ashura. So Hasnain Walji is a writer and researcher with 23 books on nutrition and natural medicine to his credit. He is the executive director of the United Global Initiative, a nonprofit organization focused on women's empowerment and promoting children's health. As an interfaith activist, Hasnain is a member of the National Catholic Muslim Dialogue. He is also the producer of the acclaimed documentary, The Khojas, A Journey of Faith, depicting the 700-year history of the Khojas. So with that, Dr. Walji, we're looking forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohseni, for the opportunity. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's an absolute delight for me to mark this day of the inauguration of the Ashura project at Harvard. All the more so that this is on the blessed eve of Nime Shaban, as illustrated by Dr. Mohseni. And in fact, this journey began with an interaction with Professor Payam Mohseni, and I'm sure he recalls this vividly, at the United Nations headquarters on October 8th, 2018, at the conference entitled Reclaiming Intellectual Primacy and Promoting Just, Peaceful, and Inclusive Societies, where we discussed the opportunities and challenges of enhancing thought leadership in the Muslim community in North America. Well, long story short, one of the key outcomes of that conference is today, where we are blessed to see this moment to inaugurate the Ashura at Harvard project as a distinct track within the project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs at the Harvard University's Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. As so very eloquently outlined by Dr. Mohseni and Professor Nicholas, the key activity will be to undertake research and produce scholarly output on the historic event of Ashura and the culturally diverse manifestations of mourning for Imam Husayn in the West, looking at the early Islamic history as it related to the subject of Ashura and the various cultural, artistic, and ritual manifestations of Ashura, as have been developed across the world into the contemporary era. So before I seek your indulgence to share a very brief survey of the study of Shia Muslims in American academia to help contextualize the very premise of this project, allow me to echo Dr. Payam's sentiments and place on record my deep gratitude to the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York, to Mr. Taki Jaffer and Mr. Sadiq Jaffer and Ghulam Fazal for the generous gift to enable this project in the memory of their father, the late philanthropic icon, Al-Haj Mustafa Jiyar Jaffer, a man whose passion to further the teachings of Imam Husayn was legendary, as evidenced by the many projects he supported during his lifetime. May Allah shower him with his infinite mercy, and may he continue to receive his blessings as a result of this noble project. My early exposure of how Western academia viewed Islam as a young man was when I first read Orientalism by Edward Said, who defined Orientalism and the concept of othering. He postulated that the recognition in the West as, and I quote now, the basic distinction between East and West as the starting point for elaborate theories, epics, novels, social descriptions, and political accounts concerning the Orient is people, customs, destiny, and so on. End of quote. Orientalism seemed to have provided a justification for European colonialism based on the self-serving history in which the West constructed the East as very different and notably even inferior. Hence, Oriental studies shaped a monolithic, as outlined by Professor Nicholas, a monolithic depiction of Islam as the other, virtually ignoring the diversity, the lived traditions, and the cultures of the Muslim people, which included Shia Islam. Now, if we fast forward to the 19th century, we find that some scant academic writings devoted to the Shia started appearing, such as the Hungarian Jewish scholar's work, Ignaz Goldzier's treatise on Sunni Shia polemics in 1874. Judging by the Parsons Index Islamicus from 1906 to 1955, which is a bibliographical index for Islamic studies, the general study of Shia Muslims remained limited, as has been mentioned by our eminent scholars. A rare exception perhaps is Dwight Donaldson's work, The Shiite Religion in 1920. He uniquely drew from Shia sources on the life and times of the Imams rather than Sunni sources. Interestingly, he signed his preface location as Mashhad, Persia in January 2nd, 1933. Indeed, it was in the 60s and 70s that French scholars like Louis Massignon in 1962 and Henry Corbin began to enhance Shia studies with translated works in philosophy, mysticism, and historians like Montgomery Watt, and in Scotland and Marshall Hodgson in Chicago began writing about Shia Islam during that period. As is evident that most of the scholarship, except Hodgson's, was within Europe until the entry of the preeminent scholar on Shiism today, Said Hossein Nasr. Dr. Nasr was instrumental in enriching the field of Shia studies in North American academia, and amongst his many works was his groundbreaking translation of Allama Tabatabai work, Shiat Islam, introduced the thoughts of this profound Shia scholar to a Western audience. A living legend himself, Dr. Nasr continues to be a major influence shaping the narratives on Islam and Shia studies in Western academia for almost half a century or more. So changes in geopolitics in the Middle East and the 1970s revolution in Iran brought an increased focus on Western scholarship of Islam and Shia Muslim studies in particular. This was a milestone towards a critical re-evaluation of Shia studies. So in the 70s, amongst others, Hussein Jaffri's The Origins and the Early Development of Shia Islam, Mujan Momin's An Introduction to Shia Islam, and I.K. Howard's translation of Sheikh Mufid's Kitab al-Irshad were now made available to the Western audiences. The 1980s also saw a cohort of Western-based Shia scholars entering American academia. Some of these scholars were trained both in Shia seminaries as well as Western universities, providing a more nuanced elucidation of Shia Islam. Of particular interest in this genre of studies is Linda Clark's anthology published in 2001 titled The Shiite Heritage, in which has a combination of papers by scholars, both Western and those trained in the Shia seminaries. Now, reflecting this increasingly interdisciplinary nature of Shia studies today, a 4-volume compilation by Colin Turner and Paul Loeff's Shi'ism in 2007 has curated key contributions over the past 50 years of Shi'ism, allowing access to material that has hitherto has been difficult to locate. So, as can be seen from this very brief review, and it's by no means a comprehensive one, that Western scholarship on Shi'ism has steadily grown in the last few decades. An emerging field in recent times is the Shia experience in America. Scholars like Linda Wallbridge and Liaquat Takim with his Shi'ism in America, amongst others, have also contributed to this field. More relevant to the Ashura track that we inaugurate today, and upon which we'll be able to build on the scholarship or works by Professor Vernon Schubel, like Religious Performance in Contemporary Islam, David Pinol, the Shia, the Horse of Karbala, Sayyid Akbar Haider, Reliving Karbala, and Kamran Agahi, the Martyrs of Karbala, and many, many more who have studied the impact of the tragedy of Karbala. These scholars have articulated the ways in which Imam Husayn's martyrdom has been adopted by various groups from an individual level in which Karbala lament is invoked to intercede in personal sorrows to a socio-political level in promoting social justice. However, much more remains to be studied as to the ways in which the Shias have adapted the mourning ceremonies to be relevant in the Western and American setting to enable the upcoming generations to build a distinctly Shia identity in America. Yet another facet of Shia studies is within the genre of gender studies and the female figures in the formation of Shia identity, and scholars have been focusing on Shia iconic female figures, as has been mentioned, like Zainab or Lady of Light Fatima, such as, and people like Mary Thurkis, Chosen Amongst Women, Diane D'Souza's Partners of Zainab, Hossein Kamali's History of Islam in 21 Women, and Christopher Cloesy book Fatima, Daughter of Muhammad, Half of My Heart, The Narrative of Zainab, and he has just published an amazing new book called Angels Hastening, The Karbala Dreams, are all adding to this rich genre of studies that is going on in academia as well as the public square. So in the post-9/11 world, along with all Muslims, Shia Muslims have endeavored to make themselves more relevant to their fellow Americans, countering the mischaracterization of Islam. At long last, American academia has begun to acknowledge the need to hear Shia voices, not just about the Shia, but through conversations with the Shia. And this is an important development, and the Ashura at Harvard project is indeed a testimony to that acknowledgement. At the same time, the Ashura at Harvard is an aspiration to give back to American society by sharing the moral and the ethical teachings of the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, and his Ahlul Bayt. For example, how did Imam Husayn demonstrate the essence of Tawheed, monotheism, through his sermons on the day of Ashura, his prayers on the day of Ashura, and his famous supplication called the Dua Arafah? These are indeed things that require deep study, and indeed every discourse as he began his journey from Medina to the last words on his lips on the day of Ashura are worthy of deep reflection and deserve intellectual rigor to distill the essence of his humanity, his gnosis, and above all, his sublime and act of total submission to the will of Almighty. I therefore hope and pray that the Ashura at Harvard project will not just be an academic discourse confined to the ivory towers, but extend its reach to have a much needed engaged dialogue in the public square. The Ashura project can become a catalyst in engendering academic and civil discourses through the study of Imam Husayn's stance against oppression and tyranny, and will inshallah help to promote social justice in an America that is so afflicted with inequities. Once again, I appreciate Dr. Payam's visionary leadership and the generosity of the Jaffer Family Foundation in successfully bringing this much needed project to fruition, and pray for the success of this noble endeavor, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walji, for your very insightful comments, and thank you as well for your kind words and kind wishes. And we also very much look forward to working with you and having your experience and your thoughts and analyses very much inform the Ashura project here as we develop and shape and expand it. So we're very much looking forward to that. I'd like to take the opportunity now to actually invite two board members of the Jaffer Family Foundation to speak for us as well. If I can invite, have Mohammad Sagha Jaffer and Sadiq Jaffer join us here. That would be wonderful to hear of their views. Let me introduce each of these board members as well. Mohammad Sagha Jaffer is the chairman of the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York, with a passion for making a difference to humanity through alleviation of poverty. He's a successful entrepreneur and a pioneer in the computer hardware sector. He runs several businesses, and despite a busy schedule, makes time to personally visit numerous water and other rural development projects in remote areas around the world, run by the Jaffer Family Foundation. Also, we have Sadiq Jaffer here with us today as well. He's also a board member of the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York. He's active in numerous civic and educational initiatives, helping and mentoring young men and women from marginalized communities. Sadiq is an astute land developer running a vast network of commercial and housing projects in Florida. He's also been a long-serving member of the Shia community and served as counselor of Nisimco at the World Federation of the Khoja Shia Isna Ashari Muslim communities as well. So thank you to both of you, and we're very delighted to have you here with us today and looking forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you for the warm introduction, Dr. Payam. Assalamu alaikum to all. Jaffer Family Foundation is pleased to have the opportunity to be a part of this noble project to create a greater understanding of Ashura and Shia Islam from the prestigious Harvard University. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first ever academic project specifically dedicated to the life and times of Imam Husayn, who inspired many social justice causes by his valiant stand against oppression and tyranny, and is indeed a fitting tribute that the Ashura track be established at one of the finest institutions like Harvard University. We would like to thank Dr. Payam Mohseni and his team at the Weatherhead Center, and to have initiated this inspiring track of Shia studies at Harvard University. As a family, we feel blessed to have had the opportunity to participate in this project in memory of my late father, Mustafa Jia Jaffer. He was very passionate in encouraging and promoting the remembrance of the tragedy of Karbala. This is evidenced by his efforts in founding the Madrasa, Hussaini Madrasa in New York, Abul Fazl Center in Qom, and surrounding centers all over the world. The Jaffer Family Foundation continues the legacy of my father in numerous humanitarian projects, addressing the cause of social justice, as taught by the sacrifices made by Imam Husayn. We pray for a successful implementation of this great initiative undertaken at the Harvard University, and hope it will enhance a greater understanding amongst people of all faiths to make this world a better place for all humanity. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. Mr. Taki Jafar, is Sadiq Jafar available?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Salaam alaikum. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be part of this august body and this noble mission. We would like to thank all the participants and the hosting committee for their tireless efforts. As stated, the message of Hussein should be a way of life for all of us. We are reminded that kullu yawmin ashura, kullu arzin karbala. And the translation is every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala. We again thank every one of you today. And I would like to end with requesting a Surah Fatiha for our beloved father, Mustafa Jafar, and all marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sadiq Jafar and Mr. Mohammad Sagha Jafar. Thank you to both of you for your kind words and prayers. Thank you as well to the Jafar Family Foundation of New York as well for your support in launching this in the memory of your late father. As to conclude this special event, we have one final speaker. I'd like to ask Mohammad Sagha to speak for us as well about the importance of studying Ashura at the university. Mohammad Sagha, he's been active with us for years as part of the project. He's an associate and also the research director for our history and identity track here at Harvard's project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs. He is currently a PhD candidate in Islamic history and civilization at the University of Chicago, where he's also the co-director of the Shia Studies Group. His research focuses on the origins of Muslim sectarian identity and political institutions and the historical development of Islamic political thought. His doctoral dissertation entitled Hidden Empires, Revolt Leadership, and the Shi'i Underground in Early Islam examines underground revolutionary politics, debates on orthodoxy and heterodoxy in Islamic history, and looks at basically Islamic political institutions from before the Abbasid Revolution until the capture of Baghdad by the northern Iranian Shia Buyid dynasty, which marked the high period of the Shia centuries. So Mohammad, if you can.
Salam and good afternoon. I'm very delighted to be speaking at this event today with my distinguished colleagues. And I would like to reiterate some of what was said today, but to also extend my thanks and gratitude to the Jafar Family Foundation of New York and the larger team working on these issues at the Project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs and beyond, who endeavored to make this research track a reality. I'm very excited to contribute to this important research track on the life and legacy of Imam Husayn, as I believe we are situated at a very unique time, both in world history, but also in particular global Shia consciousness and civic participation. And we require complex and relevant narratives able to speak to today's particular globalized context. The Project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs at Harvard, we are a grassroots initiative, and we receive substantial support from the civic community, both from community leaders and donors, as well as Muslim American and Shia American students who have a strong desire to learn more about their heritage and what it means to be a Shia Muslim in the contemporary period. We work with dozens of students and researchers, including Shia American students, as well as leading scholars in the field, who are an integral part of our mission to both study but also engage with dynamic Shia communities across the world and here at home. Working with the next generation is of extraordinary importance because we are seeing a new cultural context of Shia Islam in the West, where second and third generation Shia communities will be forming new narratives and views of themselves. Training scholars, producing research, fostering new conversations on Shia Islam, and its contribution overall to Islam, as Dr. Boylston mentioned, is very promising and absolutely required. But oftentimes we think of Shi'ism only as a sect or denomination of Islam, which it is. But it's also much more than that. Shi'ism is relevant not just as a sect of Islam, but also as a contributor to global civilization. Shia dynasties and thinkers have been key players in global science and history, such as the Buyids and Hamdanids, who supported scholars such as Ibn Sina, the Safavid dynasty, whose image of Isfahan is behind me now, the Oud dynasty in the subcontinent, who were so important in supporting Shia scholars in the not so distant past, and many other examples across different geographies and time periods. But in particular, the legacy of Imam Husayn and Ashura rests at an intersection which can play a crucial role in both explaining the misunderstandings of Shiism, which are very widespread and of pressing importance today, due to the discrimination and repression that many Shia Muslims face in many parts of the world, as well as a growing attention being paid to Shiism, both in contemporary matters and the very important role of the Imamate, legacies of Imam Ali and Imam Husayn, and of course Imam Husayn's uprising in understanding of early Islamic history and leadership. In this vein, it's important to discuss Imam Husayn's importance as a figure for interfaith as well as intrafaith dialogue. Imam Husayn is a universal figure representing resistance against injustice and tyranny, who has impacted the consciousness of so many peoples and communities throughout time and space. Therefore, part of his message, which is particularly relevant today, is that Shiism is not defined by race, ethnicity, class, or nationality, but all that matters, according to the historical doctrines of Shiism, is love of the Ahlul Bayt and the values that are universal to humanity and human betterment. The slogan, Hubb al-Husayn yajma'una, the love of Husayn unites us, is therefore not about loyalty to one specific social identity, but about love and purity of Imam Husayn, which speaks to all humans. This serves as a reminder to Shias and non-Shias alike that religion, as exemplified by Imam Husayn, is not just a social identity marker, but rather humanistic in the truest sense of the word, and encourages the best in humanity in all times and places. So I would like to end with reiterating gratitude to the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York for helping enable this research track, and to emphasize in many other areas, including Shiism and Shia Americans in the diaspora, Shiism in various world regions such as South Asia and Africa and beyond, and the other work that the project is doing, both in interfaith work and intrafaith work, to help with de-escalating conflict and peace-building initiatives across the globe. We rely on relationships with the community and Shia civil society, and working with the new generation of Shia Americans in developing their voices in a multicultural society in order to advance study and research on Shiism, which can contribute to creating rigorous, balanced, and forward-thinking narratives on Shia Islam, pluralism, and cross-cultural understanding. We hope you will support us in these endeavors and the project on Shiism's efforts to positively impact the current discourse and to create new narratives relevant for global challenges and peaceful dialogue across humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohammad. Thank you for your comments and kind words, and as always, and looking forward to having you help develop and shape our track and research on history and thought as it relates to Ashura. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us today. We're, again, very excited for the launch of the Ashura track here at Harvard University to focus on the meaning and values and history of Ashura and the life of Imam Husayn. Please do join us and follow our events as they develop. We're going to have, a lecture series, workshops, publications on the importance and subject of Ashura. So please do follow the output that we hope to produce, the high quality output we plan on developing as part of this Ashura track. But of course, we're looking forward to your participation, all our broader endeavors and projects as well. Just one main thing, the project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs will be hosting a landmark international symposium on diversity and unity in transnational Shi'ism over 4 days from April 5 to 8 this April. So not this week, but the week after. And we'll have more than 18 significant, scholars of Shia studies present at this conference, and we'll have a keynote with said Hossein Nasr as well on how to approach intra-Shia dialogue. So we're active in many different areas and hope that you can be with us and join us for these various manifestations of research and scholarly products from the project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs at Harvard University. Thank you again to our speakers here today, Professor Boylston, Dr. Walji, Mohammad, and of course, the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York, and the two board members who are here with us today, Mohammad Taghi Jaffer and Sadiq Jaffer. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Goodbye.